Tonight, the president says he'd accept dirt on an opponent from a foreign national, and he says everyone does it. A former top Obama campaign official will join us and tell us they never did it. Then a former federal prosecutor will weigh in on whether accepting campaign information from foreign sources is even legal. And also our special report on hate crimes. Overall crime in New York City is down, but the hate is up. We'll show you what's going on. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French. Here we go again. One comment from the president that dominates the news cycle. Here it is.
Your campaign this time around, if foreigners, if Russia, if China, if someone else offers you information on an opponent, should they accept it or should they call the FBI?
I think maybe you do both. I think you might want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening.
Do you want that kind of interference in our elections?
It's not an interference. They have information. I think I'd take it. If I thought there was something wrong, I'd go maybe to the FBI if I thought there was something wrong. But when somebody comes up with Oppo research, right? They come up with Oppo research. Oh, let's call the FBI. The FBI doesn't have enough agents to take care of it. But you go and talk honestly to congressmen. They all do it. They always have. And that's the way it is. It's called Oppo research.
Democrats naturally jumped all over that. If we played all of their sound bites from today, it would take up the entire hour. So we'll leave it at Chuck and Nancy to give you an idea of where the Dems stand.
If someone called from a country and said, we have information on your opponent, oh, I think I'd want to hear that, unquote. That is shocking, shocking. Yet, sadly, par for the course of this president.
Yesterday, the president gave us once again evidence that he does not know right from wrong. The intelligence community with great confidence has put forth that the Russians interfered in our election. That's an assault on our democracy.
Even the FBI director appointed by President Trump disagrees with his boss. Here's Christopher Wray during congressional testimony last month.
My view is that if any public official or member of any campaign is contacted by any nation state or anybody acting on behalf of a nation state about influencing or interfering with our election, then that's something that the FBI would want to know about.
Wray is not the only Republican speaking out against the president. Here's Senator Lindsey Graham, who agrees with the FBI director.
Giving you anything of value, whether it be money or information on your opponent, the right answer is no. And I've been consistent about that. I think Christopher Wray's statement is the correct statement. I think it's a mistake. I think it's a mistake of law. I don't want to send a signal to encourage this.
And Republican Congressman John Ratcliffe of Texas, who sits on the Intelligence Committee, said this.
I think any candidate that gets information from another country about their opponent should talk to the FBI. That's certainly what I would do.
For more, we turn to Democratic strategist Roger Fisk. Roger was a key member of both Obama campaigns. Roger, let's be clear. The president says getting dirt on an opponent from a foreign power is legal and everyone does it or would do it. You've worked on a number of campaigns. Is it legal? Does everyone do it?
It is not legal, and barely anyone does it. It's the law is very clear on this, and it says campaigns, presidential campaigns, cannot accept anything of value from foreign nationals. Now, that could be a dozen donuts, that could be 1,000 phone lines, that could be $100,000 in cash, that could be intelligence, or any number of things. But the law is very clear. Campaigns cannot accept anything of value from foreign nationals. The president says, I talk to foreign leaders all the time. What should I do? Call the FBI after I talk to Queen Elizabeth? What do you make of that defense? And is Prince Charles offering him opposition research? Well, unfortunately, it's the way he frames it is just as weak and pathetic as his responses have been throughout this entire thing. I saw a clip from the 2016 campaign this morning, and he's like, yeah, as if I would just call Russia. That's not how it went, and that's not how anyone is claiming it went. Russia had 6, 8, and up to possibly 10 points of entry into the Trump campaign, and it was very decentralized. So, for example, the way they compromised General Flynn was much different than the way they compromised Gates, which was different than the way they compromised Manafort, etc. So these were all tentacles and points of entry that were looking to leverage various relationships and pressure points within the Trump campaign. It's not like no one's claiming that he just picked up the phone one day and called Putin and said, hey, can you give me a hand? It's more that there were multiple fronts on this effort multiple attempts to compromise the Trump campaign. And every time they knocked on the door, the staff of the Trump campaign opened it and said, come on in.
And given what we saw in 2016, my sense from his answer in this interview isn't just that he was inviting foreign powers like Russia to spy on his opponents, but in my mind it all but guarantees that they will. Do you agree?
I mean, one thing that he, amongst many, that he has never grasped is the full gravity of the words that come out of the mouth of the President of the United States that move markets all over the world, that have all our, not only our enemies, but our allies or potential allies dissecting every single sentence. And when he says things like this, what that was a green light to dozens of intelligence services around the world. And right now, the leaders of those intelligence services are saying, I want a plan about how to infiltrate the Trump 2020 campaign on my desk by close of business, and people are going to generate those plans and operationalize them.
So what does this mean for the Democrats running for the White House, and what would your advice to those candidates be, both politically, but also in terms of their own campaign security?
Well, first off, they need to be very, very sober and extremely vigilant about their IT infrastructure. And in fact, they should have some kind of a third-party, verification mechanism that's not even composed of their staff, so that there's someone taking a sober look at exactly what's coming and going out of their servers and et cetera. That said, politically, it's extremely easy for candidates to get pulled into the centrifugal force of this funhouse mirror campaign that the president has going on right now. I've said this all along. Everyone who is running needs to start with a blank piece of paper. They need to lay out exactly why they are running, what they hope to do, the vision they have for the country over the next 5 or 10 years, and then block and tackle the legislative and the policy and the foreign policy steps that really put meat on that bone, because the Trump kind of carnival is going to play out the way it will. But anyone that goes out and bases the rationale for their candidacy or how they're going to present themselves to the American people or the core values of their campaign cannot do that as simply a relief or reaction to the carnival show of the Trump campaign. They need to focus intently on their vision for the country, and that's what they need to focus on.
There's another aspect of the president's answer and his willingness to accept help from foreign governments that bothers me. It's certainly wrong morally and ethically. It's probably illegal. You say it is. To me, it's also incredibly tone deaf. We've had 3 years of Russia investigations and this president's complaints. He sees how this one aspect of his presidency has divided the nation, and despite that sensitivity, he still says he'd do it again. What does that tell you about him, as well as his ethics and morals or lack thereof?
Well, it's a complete moral and ethical vacuum. I think if you take the Machiavellian kind of interpretation of this, then you could make a case for the fact that he's doing something so ridiculous like this to goad the Democrats into impeaching him because he thinks it's going to motivate his base. That would be missing the central challenge he has ahead of him. He clearly doesn't have a problem motivating his base. He could go out and say 2 + 2 is 5, and 35% of the American people are going to believe him. What he needs to do is grow his base. And with every time that he says something outrageous, with every time that he insults specific Americans by name, CEOs, journalists, athletes, elected officials, foreign heads of state, on and on and on, all of those are barriers to him growing his base, and that's what he needs to be focused on, because clearly he can do anything, right? He could just announce right now, he could produce an MOU that says he's going to collude with Russia, and 35% of the American people would just shrug and say that's no big deal, and wouldn't it be great if we got along with Russia, because that's what he says.
So, Roger, let me end with this question. What do you think should happen in response to the president's comments? Should this be pushing Democrats closer to impeachment?
I think it definitely adds to the continuum. But I think I'm coming back to this larger kind of civic challenge that we all have waiting for us at the end of this whole train wreck, which is to reach out to essentially a lost generation of American youth who have grown up seeing the President of the United States insult virtually everyone, call people losers, lie over and over. And my heart goes out to all the kids that are in the wind turbine cancer wards right now across the country, because he made that one up too. So we have a lot of work ahead of us to get back to an idea that whether or not you even agree with the president on their politics, that they are still a sober steward of the national security, and that they have the larger interests of not only America, but the broader Western democratic experiment as their North Star. And unfortunately, we have kids growing up right now that I would imagine in classrooms and things like that all over the country, you're seeing an increase in kids calling teachers losers and stuff like that because that's what the president does. The civic damage of this is actually going to be much more long-term than the political damage that we deal with every day.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump's questionable behavior is one thing. This sounds like something significantly different and far more serious. Roger Fisk, Democratic strategist, thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Andrew, thanks so much. Have a great day.
Up next, we just looked at the politics of what the president said about taking info from foreign governments about campaign opponents. After the break, a former federal prosecutor joins us with the legal ramifications.